Okay, great. Great. Oh, there's the red button. Okay. Wonderful. Welcome. If you're just joining us, we're just getting started talking about 21st century. We're doing some stuff in the chat. And I see some current grantees, experienced grant writers, not a grant writer, former grantee. Yeah, so everybody's kind of at a little different place, and that's perfectly fine. We try to keep that in mind, right? So even if you've done this before, there will be several tips, lots of tips about this. The first thing I will tell you is, number one, the RFA changed a lot. So if you are experienced at this, just be aware it has changed. So you need to know that. Okay, so don't pull out your old grant and dust it off and submit it. It will not likely be successful. All right. Okay, so I didn't see anybody say the boss sent them, but I suspect. Right. All right, so on our agenda today, and you got a copy of the agenda. You know, we can try to fit this all together, but I never know how long each section is going to take. I've done it several times, but I never know for sure. But the important things are the questions and answers, right? So the questions and answers are going to formally be answered by us after the first break, after lunch, after the second break, and then as we're wrapping up again today, right? So more about that in a second. This is kind of our lay of the land. And the content we're going to be covering, it relates to the RFA, the request for applications, that I think it's 72 pages this year, something like that. To that document, 74 pages, my bad. The mechanics of it, the order that you write it in, what you write, and I've underlined the term blinding, okay? Not because it's blindingly hard to read. No, that's not it. There is a very new thing this year, and I'm going to mention it multiple times today, that if your proposal is not blinded appropriately, and that means that you've taken out all the names, all the identifying information, if it's not blinded appropriately, it will not be successful. It will be rejected. Okay. I want to say that again. If you don't blind your proposal appropriately, the grants management branch will deem that non-responsive, and it basically disqualifies you from the competition. Okay. More on that in a little bit, but I'm gonna layer that in there so nobody misses that as we go through a long day. We're also going to spend quite a bit of time on the forms and attachments. It's a lot of heavy lifting for a day, but I want to give you a little bit of encouragement. Lots of people win this grant. There are lots of 21st century programs in Kentucky. There are lots of kids being served. The only way you absolutely cannot win is if you don't play. Everybody's got to win. Might as well. Somebody's got to win. All right, so just to remind us, we're going to start with a little bit on procrastination. Some of you seen this slide before. Writing is 90% procrastination and 30% panic. I think the panic piece should be a little higher, but other than that. So today is a day for a little bit of panic. And I also want to say, if you feel overwhelmed, that's okay. Take notes, get your highlighter out, get some sticky notes ready. And if you ever need just to take a breath and you need me to come back and explain something, throw a question up in the box, okay? We are here to help, not to overwhelm you. It's just a lot. All right, one more procrastination slide. This one's kind of new. Hi, Cecilia. How's the writing going? Slow. I'm finding it hard to make progress. But that's okay. They say writing is 1% inspiration, 99% procrastination. And she says, no, it's perspiration. And yeah, she says, yes, you sweat from all the procrastination. So this is to help you get moving on your proposal. It is due in a month. Okay, 1 month. Now, let me look at my handy dandy calendar. Yes, today is the 9th. And you may say, but Jonna, it's due December 10th. More on this in a little bit. But if it's due on December 10th, and this year we're not allowing any hand deliveries, Let's say it again. No hand deliveries of proposals to the Kentucky Grants Branch. Okay. They must be received by mail, by a special carrier like UPS, FedEx, something like that. Okay. It's a COVID restriction. No hand delivered proposals, and they must be in the hand of the KDE Grants Branch at 4 o'clock on December 10th. That tells me you can't carry it to Frankfurt, as many of us have done over the years, right? Gotta ship it out. So plan for that in your calendar. There are housekeeping notes. I keep saying let's do questions. Well, how do I want you to do that? This is not my first Zoom or Teams or WebEx or Google call. This is my 4,222nd call. Okay. So in the chat box, when you put a question, please start the question with the word question. That way, when I'm skimming through, I can tell. Otherwise, I'm happy for you guys to chat all afternoon. You can talk to each other. You can give each other ideas. I'm going to have a few things that I give you to answer. So if it's a question that needs answering, please put question. That will also help us in these 3 ways of doing it, so that at the end of the call, the chat can be taken and the questions can be put into the official FAQ document, the frequently asked questions document, that KDE will be arranging and putting back out on the Grants Branch page. So you can find that. And I think there's a date that we'll look at in a minute on that, right? So I'm going to do my best to answer these quickly and in a timely manner. We'll see how it goes today, right? But wait, you may say, hang on. The first big question that you have may relate to something else. It may relate to COVID, right? So what the heck do we do about that? We are in the middle of COVID. Well, you know, here's what I'll tell you, and this is what I've been doing all year. First, I look at the calendar. When will this grant start for you? This grant will start for you by July 1st. Lord knows we're all praying hard that by July 1st, 2021, some of this stuff is resolved. I'll just use that word. That is, we either will have control of it or we will be in some other way living with it, right? Okay. This fall, I'm from Western Kentucky, and I will tell you, the Bowling Green and Warren County school districts have been doing a pretty good job on an alternate schedule of keeping schools open. That could change today or tomorrow, but as of last week, they were open. Another county that I have grandchildren in, Barron County, has not had schools open. By July, we're hopeful that things will be better. So what am I advising you to do? Okay, so remember that I'm a contractor. I'm not a KDE employee. My job here is to tell you how I would write the proposal and how I would present my district and my community. I would not say much about COVID. I just say how I'm going to work with kids. The smart reviewer will know that you're doing the best you can with what you have to get things done. If you feel compelled, if you go, but you know, this just makes no sense. What if we have to completely change? Okay, I'm not sure July is even coming, but if July 1 is coming, you plan the way you're supposed to plan. You just plan for what you think is going to happen. And if it changes, if school districts close, KDE will be there to help you when the time comes. Okay. So all you can do is create the best plan you can that includes an opening, a start of this program July 1st. The kids won't start until September, okay, or maybe late August, depending on your school calendar. By then, things will look different than they do today, one way or the other. So all that is to say, we're not going to talk about COVID today. We just did. We're done. The rest of it, unless it's to joke, we can joke about stuff, you know, like, are you wearing your pajama pants? I'm not asking. So we're going to do what we need to do for kids, which is plan for a great year with this program to begin July 1st with students to start sometime at the end of August or the beginning of September. Yeah. And there's my COVID spiel. All right, so we're going to start off with a high-level view of the RFA. Okay, we're going to do a real kind of just a flip through of what we think. So get your RFA in front of you. Okay, and I'm going to we're literally going to do a 60-second flip through, whether you're on your screen or you've got paper. Literally a 60-second flip through. We're going to go through lots of it today, but I just want you to be familiar if you haven't looked. All right, page 1 is critical. Mine is almost all yellow from the highlighting. We're going to flip through each of these pages, each of these sections. You will have different parts. You have some eligibility and overview information through this first part. I'm seeing private homes. Part 2, which talks about how to design the program. 13. It's all about attendance, etc. Lots of information about the budget and transportation. Then when you get over to, I'm going to go all the way over to page 41. On page 41, you find the evaluation criteria. Now, if I was doing a Post-it note, and I have one right here, mark that with a Post-it note, because that's where I'm going to start my real deep dive when I start my writing. Okay. Also, I am going to mark page 51, because page 51 is my submission information. It's how I name my files. There's also a little bit more about that blinding happening there. Okay. And then from page 52 forward are the forms that you're going to also be completing and attaching. Later today, we will march through all of the forms. Okay. By the way, if you hear the buffalo running through my living room, that's just my husband and the dog playing fetch. Okay, just a buffalo. It's okay. It's a 2-year-old lab who thinks she's a buffalo, but that's okay. All right, so just a high-level flip through. Feel free, if you've not looked at this really well, that you start making some notes, start flipping through these different sections.
Right. John, you have a couple questions in the chat box. I didn't know when you wanted to address those.
Let's do those now. Let's see what we got. All right. So let me see. Megan, is that you talking?
Yes, it was.
Oh, good deal. Let's see. From Angela Roberts. Is it postmarked on or before? No, ma'am. It's in the hands of K2E. Great question. At 4 p.m. on December 10th. Not postmarked, in their hands, which is different, right? So, and it's not emailed, it is a paper copy. Okay, let's see another one. Thank you for the question. If you are due for an extension on Cycle 15 grant, when will they be viewed? What format?
Okay, on that one, Jonna, just real quickly, I do want to say that some of these are particular to your grant and your year, and I have tried to send an email to Jackie Roth. If you are in your 3rd year and meeting all eligibility requirements, you can apply for an extension, but some of those requirements have changed in this RFA. So anyone that is thinking about applying for an expansion grant, they need to look at those requirements. If you are talking about your years 4 and 5, you do not apply for another grant to get years 4 and 5. You will complete your continuation progress report. That's something particular to that specific site. So Jackie, if you can check your email, I just responded to you.
Perfect. Also, Carrie had a question, and this is a great question. When describing our program, can we say prior to COVID we had? Absolutely. I don't see any problem with that. And let me, for those of you new to the program, or to the 21st Century program, let's say in January you had 75 regularly attending students. I don't see any reason why not say in January of 2020, we had this many regularly attending students. Now, your report in the back, you've got a report you have to give in the back. There may be a place where you could footnote a COVID reminder, okay? When I say let's not talk a lot about COVID, what I mean is I don't want you to spend 2 pages talking about things you'll do if COVID's still here. That's not really what the reviewers are going to want to know. They know that if COVID's still there and still big and bad, that you're going to have to change. They're going to do exactly what you're going to do, which is look at a program that will help kids. I guess this is a great way of looking at it. If you're going to have COVID every year for the next 5 years, that's something else entirely, and we're going to have to figure that out as a team. Okay, that's not something you need to worry about in this application. Okay? All right. So back to our slides a little bit and our little masked boys. All right. So remember that everything's redesigned this year. In fact, some of it's simpler. I kind of like the way it's done. But anytime you're doing a grant, here's for my newbies now. This is true for every grant ever in the history of the world, period. A grant is simply paying for a solution to a defined problem. Okay, you have a problem, and in this case for 21st century, it's academic, it's non-cognitive, or those behavioral or aspirational indicators, and then you have family, literacy, and other supports. Those are the three core big things. They're divided up a little bit into 6 areas, but this is what has always been the driver of 21st century. So what are the problems in those areas? And then what are the solutions to those problems? Okay, well, the solutions that are required as part of the 21st century program are your program, your ability and capacity, the activities you select, including high quality staff to do that, your co-applicant and your community partners, and whatever anticipated results you plan to have. Okay, now this slide will pop up again in a little bit. What's your problem? What's your solution? That's basically all a grant is. Now, to help you with, remember that in another century, literally, I interviewed John Grisham, the author. And in interviewing him, he said, you know, writing a book's the easy part. It's the publishing that's hard. He said, because when you write a book, basically all you're doing is you're taking a really great character that everybody will like, and you're putting him in trouble. And then the rest of the book, you get him out of trouble. That's what a grant is. You have a problem. You have kids who have troubles, and now you're getting them out of that trouble. So if you have trouble remembering a grant, think of John Grisham. That's certainly a nice thing to think of. All right, but first, the money. I hear from people all the time who tell me, Jonna, it's just all that red tape and the paperwork and all that. I do not accept whining from people about grants. And the reason I don't is that if you don't want to do the paperwork, don't write the grant. Okay? Grants are not free money. This is someone else's money. And if you get someone else's money, then you have to play by their rules. That was true when you were 7 years old. It was true when you're 17 years old. And it's true today. In fact, I like to say that our parents were our first grantors. When we went to them and we asked them for money and they said no, or we went to them and we gave them this really great plan for why we needed $10 and we got a yes. So what is your really great plan for getting those funds, and can you manage that once you do? All right, so our RFA, okay, this big honking document that we've all got to deal with. There we go. I'm trying to find room on my desk for everything. So when we're looking at the RFA, the request for application, some of you may know this as an RFP or a NOFO. There's lots of different names for this document in Kentucky. Through the Kentucky Department of Education, it's called an RFA. So this is your 74 pages of gloriness, right? And there's a joke of us grant professionals. Why does it take 74 pages to write 30? Well, there's a lot of worms. It just is. I wrote one not long ago, and we had more than 300 pages of guidance for a 25-page proposal. So it is what it is. You don't want the funding? Don't apply. So make sure whoever your boss is reads it, whether it's your supervisor, your principal, your superintendent. You're going to be submitting a legal document. Okay, you're going to be promising that your district is a fiscal agent or your nonprofit will be, as a fiscal agent, will be responsible for doing this work. And by the way, every time you request a reimbursement for that work, you're again promising that you're going to do it the way they want it to be done. And you'll have lots of support and guidance, but this is not just, I'm going to try this, and this is a legal agreement that you're going into. That's part of why there's so many instructions in here. Now, as you'll see on your first page, there is the second box on the left on the first page, there is an email address where you can ask questions beyond today through next week through November 16th. Okay, you can email KDE at the KDE RFP email, that's the grants branch, and they will make sure your question gets answered, and then those will be posted about a week later. All right, so you can reach out. That's why this session is important. It helps you start thinking more deeply about various and sundry things. Now, the RFA is more than just rules and instructions. It also has some sections that will help you actually write and develop your proposal. And I've listed some of those here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to look at some of these pages real quick, so you can take a highlighter and note some of the things I'm saying, if you choose. It's up to you. All right, so I don't want to tell you how to do your note taking. So on page 5, let's look at page 5 for a moment. Page 5 is the purpose section. Okay, you'll see a little thing that says purpose. I find it very handy to always know where this paragraph or set of paragraphs are. There are 3 bullets underneath. If someone comes to you and says, hey, can we do this with this money? Go back here. What is the purpose of this grant? Every dollar that you request should meet this purpose. Okay, it should help you to make the world a better place for the kids you're addressing and their families. If it doesn't do that, it shouldn't be included. So that helps me as a grants person. I don't want to say poo-poo all those people who ask for money, but it does help me nicely say, oh, you know, what a great idea. But that, you know, that purpose is pretty specific. I don't think we can fund that with this grant. Right? So everything you do should come back to this purpose. Now, page 37, flipping over to page 37. All right, on page 37, why have I got page 30? Oh, okay, page 37 is where it starts listing your forms out. Okay, it talks about all the forms that you're going to have in your proposal, as well as the formatting requirements. This is another page that folks like me always put a Post-it note on to make sure I know exactly where that page is in my big binder. All right, page 41 through 50, this is the outline of your proposal, right? So each of this is the evaluation criteria. It's almost always called criteria. If you lose it, just Google the word, or search for the word rather, criteria. And this is where you're going to write. So for example, the first section is need. You're going to write to the need. The next section, part 2, is the project design. You're going to answer all these bullet points on those 2 pages. Okay, so we're going to spend some time on that this afternoon, so don't worry about it yet, but that is a very important section. I'll also point out page 44 specifically. On page 44, under part 3, it requests a timeline. Now, those of you who know me know I hate a timeline. Can't stand them. For one thing, the timeline is always wrong. Okay. This is November. In July, when you start your program, as I pull out my extra southern there, in July, the earth has continued to turn, right? Did 2020 look the way you thought it would look? No. So there will be things that are a little different for you based on that timeline, and that's okay. Everybody's timelines are going to be off. But why do I mention it? All right, so the timeline, if you sit down with a group of people and you say, okay, when are we going to do all this stuff? It's a great tool to help you think through what happens in July, in August, in September, in October, and onward. Okay? Now, use whatever tools you want to do that. I happen to use a big old yellow legal pad and just start writing. When I work with a group, I get chart paper out, and we use Post-its. and we move them around. Just one way of doing it. But I use a timeline constantly with my clients, with school districts, with P12, P16, because it helps people think chronologically. So I try to do that with my folks, and it's just a good thing that I like to do. All right, so also page 57. Let's go through over to page 57. And that's the logic model. We will spend some time on the logic model this afternoon as well. But just know this is a great planning tool for you. Then you have pages 69 and page 70. 69 is your school summary. Okay, so these are the things you're going to be expected to answer that may not pop up in other places. So for example, the proposed number of students to be served daily. Okay, have you thought about that yet? Or are you still thinking you're going to serve everybody in your high school? I'm thinking not everybody's going to come, number one. Number two, you can't afford that. Okay, that's expensive. So you might have to find some matching funds for that. So being able to answer the questions on page 69 and also on page 70, that helps you design your program. There are also required documents, but it helps you design your program. Now on your screen, you'll also see that I popped up just a little screenshot of the actual criteria, but it looks a little different. And that's because one of the things I do, and I've been doing it for more than 15 years now, is that I take the evaluation criteria and I copy and paste them over into a Word doc, and then I print it. Remember, I kill trees. I print it out and I put extra space between the bullets so I can start making notes. Right? That keeps me focused, because sometimes the notes I make today are not the same notes as the ones I make next week. So I just kind of keep a running list of all the things I think go in that space. Sometimes with grants, we think something's repeated. Sometimes it's not a repetition. Sometimes it's just worded differently. And this helps us rather than sitting down at a computer and just writing stream of consciousness. Okay. So this is your outline that you will be using for a well-developed, well-scoring grant proposal. Okay. Lots more about that as we go. All right, so before we go back to page 1, flip back over to page 1. I'm going to take a quick look at, see if we've got any questions. Any additional questions? Nope, we're good. Whoop, I just saw one. Will a copy of the slides be sent out? Sylvia, they are in your updated calendar notice as an attachment. Okay, so if you take a look in your calendar notice, that was updated after we got on our session, and you should be able to, oh, there, and she sees it now. Good deal. That's a good reminder for us all. All right, so page 1, some absolutes. The first one is the deadline, and has been mentioned here. The deadline is December 10th, 2020. That is in hand. Okay, so if you, and we're going to flip back and forth all day long, so get used to that. Let's see, on page 51, regarding the deadline, the middle of the page, submission of the application, it says applications received after 4 p.m. on Thursday, December 10th will be deemed non-responsive. That means they will not be reviewed. Okay, so it has to be in their hands, and it cannot be hand delivered. UPS, FedEx. Okay, that's the way I would go. Also, I want to point to something else. This application is due in their office by December 10th. There is also a proposal due the next week for the Kentucky Comprehensive Literacy Program. Is your district doing both of them? If so, do you have a strategy for dividing and conquering, right? So you need to be thinking about that. You don't want people getting confused. It's very easy. I've lived that life when you've got more than one thing happening at a time. So make sure you have kind of a plan for if you're doing both. Now, on our RFA instructions, for example, it says, the first one, it says it's not electronic, it's going to be a paper delivery, but then it says plagiarism. Plagiarism is where you take text that belong to someone else and you use that text in your own grant. Many of these grants have been around for a long time, and plagiarism is checked out at every possible turn. In the review process, our reviewers flag it, and we'll ask KDE to verify that it is not plagiarized. If you are in a district that has submitted successful proposals before, it is KDE's opinion, and I think it's correct, that you can't plagiarize yourself. So you can use your own text. So I'm gonna pick on my friend Holly out of Barron County. I don't know if she's on today, but I'll pick on her. Oh, she used to be out of Barron County. She's not there anymore. Sorry about that. Anyway, if they were writing multiple ones in Barron County, then she could have the same text in 2 or 3 proposals, and that would be okay. KDE will verify that for the reviewers as they go through their work. There are no letters allowed. Okay, no letters at all allowed. There are forms allowed, but no letters. So no letters from congressmen, letters from Aunt Sue down the road who does piano, no letters. Also, the free and reduced lunch rates, the qualifying data. There's a link in the proposal there. It is the 2019 to 20 data that we're going to use. So pull that data, and you must have at least 40% for at least one of your schools. We'll see that in a moment. All right, the co-applicant and the co-applicant agreement, those are absolutes. If you do not have a co-applicant and a co-applicant agreement, that is another thing where you could be non-responsive. We're going to talk a lot about that as we go forward. You must provide evidence that the community was notified of your intent to apply and that the public will be allowed to have input. Okay. I don't know what your kind of evidence would be. It might be a list of emails. It might be an agenda from a meeting that you can reference. Can't attach it, right? You can talk about it in your narrative, but can't attach it. And also at the very bottom of the page, effective 10/1/2020, failure to completely and fully blind copies electronically will deem the application non-responsive. Okay. More on that in a bit. It's all through this RFA. You need to blind your copies of your grant. And now, you're responsible to read all 46,000 bullets here, as well as all of the other pages of this RFA. My job is just to help you kind of go through. Okay. So let's look at page 5. Page 5, I've referenced that purpose already. I also want to reference the introduction in terms of the statutory authority. Doesn't that sound like fancy words? The statutory authority for this grant program. But there are 3 bullets under our purpose: homework assistance, evidence-based activities, and family offering services to families of our participating students. Again, not all students will be served, and not all of your families will be served. The families of your participating students need to be served if at all possible. This is the theme that will pop up on every page of this RFA. Here. And I have a question. If we are writing multiple grants, let's say one for each of our schools, can they read similarly? Yes, Kristen, they can read almost exactly. The things that will change are the data. Okay, now, and let me speak to that for a second. So let's say that you have Lovely County Elementary, not so Lovely County Elementary, and oh my goodness, they're homely schools. Those 3 schools have 3 separate sets of needs. One of them may be an elementary, one may be a middle, one may be a high school. So those are going to be different needs. Let's say they're all 3 elementaries. Well, this elementary has a different set of literacy data than this elementary. Maybe over at our 3rd elementary, we have a higher rate of students with disabilities. Maybe that's what you're focusing on. Each of the schools should have their own basic sets of needs, and then the proposal should be designed for that group. Now, with that said, when a district submits multiple grants for schools, a couple of things. First, they will be similar. It's almost impossible for a single person or even a team to rewrite a lot of that stuff. It's perfectly fine. Second, be aware, even if you submit 3, and even if they're good, that doesn't mean they're all going to win. and not because you're who you are, but because it may land with different sets of reviewers and they may score it differently. This is just a political thing. No, it's not political. I did not say that word. This is just a thing you need to tell your superintendent who might have to deal with that. So if Lovely County wins, but the other two schools don't, is that a problem in your district? It might be. Okay. It's not my problem to deal with, but it might be somebody's problem. So just be aware everybody's on the same page. So another question, if we do write one for each school, can we have the same co-applicant? That's a very good question. Again, I would go back to the need. Does the co-applicant address the need for that specific school? Keep in mind, your grant may be read by, two of them may be read by the same team, so they may see that. Or and the grants branch does a really good job of this, it may be spread out across the room. So what I always say is be transparent. Why are they your co-applicant? Okay, why will they be your co-applicant? Now, if you're a continuation grant, your co-applicant remains the same, so that's not an issue. So, not sure I answered that well enough for you, but we'll talk more about co-applicants in a bit. All right, so let's look at page 6, eligibility. And here we go. Okay, we're gonna talk. Well, that's the next page.
Hey,
on our eligibility. Yes, ma'am.
Can I jump in real quick on the question about the co-applicant? Okay, so asking if you can have the same co-applicant for each grant that you write. So it's very important to make sure that if you're going to do that, that co-applicant has the capacity to serve and meet the needs of all 3 of those applications. You know, that's one of the things you need to look at if they're going to be able to be the co-applicant and meet all the requirements in each application that you request of them. That's all.
Exactly right. And there's been a clarifying question from Sandra, and she says, so wait a minute, can I not use my own text? Yes, absolutely. You can't. When I say you can't plagiarize yourself, it's not plagiarism if it's your district's. Okay, the district owns that text. The grant professional provided it. It's their text. You can do anything you want to with your text. Okay, it is not plagiarism to use your own work again. Okay, a very common question. So yeah, you can't plagiarize yourself. So it's not plagiarism. All right, so back on page 6, the eligibility. All right, so almost anybody can apply. You can be a nonprofit, a faith-based, a school district. The school does not apply. The district applies on behalf of the schools, and you can only have up to 2 sites per grant. Okay? Again, qualifying data, you must have either be Title I school-wide, or you must meet a 40% free and reduced lunch at least one of the sites. Okay, private and homeschool students are allowed to participate, and you must address that. Okay, how they'll access that. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a little while, but just be aware, you must make it available to them just like you do all your other programs. You personally may not be aware, but your district every year reaches out to private schools and homeschools to say, here are the programs we're doing this year. If you would like to participate, let's see how to do that. You also do not have to have any after-school experience to apply, or you could have experience with an after-school program to apply. So let's say you are Lovely County Baptist Church and you've run a hotel. I hope Lovely County Baptist Church isn't running a hotel. Let's say you're running a homework assistance hotline and you have kids who come in for tutoring every day. And I hope my friends got a kick out of that. That's okay. That's prior experience. It lets the reader know that you have some capacity to do that. So that's one way where your experience helps you. If you're brand new to the game, perhaps one of your partners or co-applicants or your co-applicant has some experience in that space. So either way, you're going to have to describe it, and that's perfectly okay. As long as you're not supplanting. What does supplanting mean? It means taking something you're already doing and replacing the money with federal money. You can't do that. You have to build on what you're already doing, except for these funds. More on that too. I'm going to say that 100 times. All right, so page 7. We're going to look at page 7. Page 7, the types of applications, and I'll also remind everybody to mute your lines so we don't get to participate in phone calls and things. So types of applicants, page 7. There are 3 types of application. Well, actually 4. We're going to talk about 4. There is new, there's continuation, there's expansion, and we're going to add one to this a little later where we talk about an expansion that is continuing. Okay. But basically, new means you have never, ever had a 21st century program at your school district. What is a school district or a school site? You go by the number of the school, so the A1 number that you're assigned as a school. So, for example, if you are Lovely County Elementary and you've had a program in place, and 5 years ago you split and became Lovely Elementary and Lovely Primary, well, now the primary could maybe, it has another school site, has another number, that might be a new grant. All right, so things like that, you might reach out to KDE and ask that question specifically. What if you don't know? Now, I'm hoping everybody's listening. Okay. Every year, one or more proposals is submitted as a new application, and they weren't. They were wrong. So where they thought they might win $150,000, they only get $100,000 if they even are awarded. Why? Because if you've had a grant before, there are rules required related to continuing. Okay? You're going to continue that work. So you need to have the same co-applicant again. 21st Century has been around for a long time. In fact, let's take a look at that. There is a link, and earlier in the chat, I put that in the link. I'm going to see how this wants me to do this. Okay, I am going to I'm going to go over here to this screen, and I am going to do something, but I'm not sure what. All right, back to this screen, and I am going to, I don't want to dismiss the recording. We want that to keep going, but I do want to do this. No, I don't want to do that. Y'all just, just tap dance around your place right now while I figure out how to change my shared screen. Oh, hang on. Let's go here. Join, June, 110. Chat files. I don't want that. Nope, I don't want that. Well, I know where it is in 14 other types of things. I don't know where it is now. Let me go in here. It's not there. It should be over here. So I'm going to try in just a second to put a different screen up. But for now, the link I sent you earlier in the chat, I'm going to put it in again, I think. Yep. All right. So at this link, you can find a list of all of the grantees by county that have ever had a 21st century grant. Now, I will tell you that every year, folks do this incorrectly, right? So you need to be careful of that. Let's see if that'll let me do that. Let me ask you, can you see the list of grantees now? Yes or no in the chat, or holler at me.
Yes, we can see it, Jonna.
Yay! Who knew? I just slid it over. Okay, no button, just gotta slide it over. So this is a 15-page document. It is your responsibility to check both columns. Okay, So you see the left-hand column is the fiscal agent, but also taking a look at the site. Okay, so on the, and I'm going to use Garrard County as an example. Garrard County, halfway down, Paint Lick Elementary School was a grantee that year. Okay, if Paint Lick Elementary School wants to apply again, they're either continuation or expanded continuation. They are not a new applicant. Okay, so I'm being serious here. Every year somebody gets this wrong because they didn't look at this list, because we've never had 21st century. But guess what you have had? You've had SOAR. You've had Trojans after school program. You've had Little Panthers. You've had something that wasn't called 21st century, but it was 21st century. So check this list, because it may come back to bite you. All right. So now my slide should be back up. All right. So additional information regarding the continuation grants. You will be keeping your same applicant. At the top of page 7 on continuation applicant, it says you must use the same co-applicant as identified in your previous application. Now, we don't talk about this a lot, but there are some very slim reasons to not continue with that co-applicant. For example, what if they don't exist anymore? Say that Big Brothers Big Sisters was your co-applicant, and Big Brothers Big Sisters moved out of your county, or they closed their shop. Well, you can't really partner with them anymore. You can't be a co-applicant with them anymore. There is now a waiver process. You would need to contact KDE for a form. This is one of those things you should do today, and then fill out that form and send it back into the KDE email so everybody can see if you deserve a waiver. You should not be changing partners, or excuse me, co-applicants, just because you don't like the co-applicant. Just saying. Okay. So there's a form. Fill that out and get that in.
Okay, Jonna, can I say something right here?
Hey, clarification.
Okay.
Bridget, this is your presentation. You can say anything you want to say.
Okay, so this is not something that I should not be receiving all these email requests about changing your co-applicant. There's only 2 or 3 reasons why this would be even reviewed for approval. If the co-applicant no longer exists, they shut down, they're not there anymore. If they've misappropriated some type of funding that you have given them, or if you know, there's a change in leadership and that leadership no longer wants to be a part of your 21st century program. So it's very specific.
Yep.
That's all.
It's not just because you want to. There has to be only one of those 3 reasons, really. But, you know, there is a process. You can do that process. Also want to look on page 52. And this is another thing that gets really confusing. Okay. So 52 is your cover page. The first thing that happens when your grants are opened is that the grants management branch at KDE, not 21st century, grants management, they're going to open this box up. They're going to look in here. They're going to see these 4 boxes at the top of the page, and they're going to see these specific things. Okay. Are you a new applicant, a continuation applicant? Are you continuing an expansion? So this is where we talk about expansion. I didn't really talk about it a minute ago. An expansion of your program is when you've been operating a program and you get to your 3rd year and you know what? We should not have just covered K through 3 in our first grant. We should also cover 4, 5, and 6. So an expansion would be if you expanded your original program to include 4, 5, and 6 grades. Okay. Now there's some specific numbers that you'll have to meet. You can't just do it for 5 kids, and that's explained over there on page 7. But that's an expansion. So that means if you want a grant in 2015 a new grant. Okay. By 2018, you might expand that grant. By 2023, you would be continuing that expansion. Okay. So you would at some point end up with 2 sets of expansion grants from your original grant, your new grant, and then continuing your expansion. So that's why you have 4 boxes this year. This got to be very confusing last year. You're either a new applicant who's never had one before, you're continuing, which means you're probably in your 4th or 5th year of funding, your 5th year of funding, and you want to continue it, or you've had a gap in service. Okay, so maybe you had a grant from 2013 to 2018 and you haven't received funding in the last 2 years, you are still continuation. Or maybe you've been operating like some of our counties have, a 21st century set of programs across your district for 10 years. Okay, so you have an original, new, then you got a continuation. You might have expanded that, and now you are continuing your expansion. Okay, so you'll have to determine which ones of those you are and check it on this page. It's very important that you get that correct. All right. So the funding amount on page 8, going back to page 8. The funding amount is the same as it was last year for those of you who are repeating. New grants get $150,000 for the first 3 years, and if you are successful, if you've done what you're supposed to do, then you're offered another 2 years at $125,000 and $100,000. Continuation grants, or a continued expansion, or an expansion grant, any of those, it's $100,000 a year until year 4 when you get $95,000, and year 5 you get $95,000. Again, by that 4th and 5th year, you have to present to KDE specifics regarding your ability to continue that. Now, continuing at the bottom of page 8 and going over to page 9, we're going to look at a couple of things here, and specifically a new thing that was added a couple of years ago. Fees are no longer allowed to be charged to your 21st century programs. Now, what does that mean? Okay, so for example, let's say that in the summer you've planned this big, huge field trip. You're going to Louisville, and you're going to go to the Broadway theater there, and the kids are going to get to go to that, and you're going to charge them $10 a piece to cover the cost. No. Okay, first off, you should get approval for any field trip like that. All field trips need prior approval, but you're not allowed to charge these children or their parents for these types of trips. Okay, so no fees are allowed, not even for charging $3 a day for kids to come to the after school. That had been a possibility, but that stopped a couple of years ago. Okay. Also on let's see, on page 9, there's a timeline listed there for your operation, and that timeline is that you start your program on July 1st. Now there's a little thing where you can continue some of your spending through September 30th of each year, but basically it's a July 1 year every year. Okay. So July 1, everything needs to be in place July 1. Now I want to spend a minute on the reference page. At the bottom of page 9, we got lots of questions about this last year, because it's like, oh, but I don't remember how to do this. It's no big deal, and I'm going to try to show you how to do this. Okay, so I'm going to try. Let me check my time. Where are we? We're good. Okay. So what the heck is APA format, and why do I have to use it for my citations? Well, first off, you're allowed to include one extra page. It follows the narrative that has your citations. Okay, so you don't have to worry about where am I going to put citations. You don't have to footnote it. It can go on page 31 of your proposal, but it should be an APA format. So how do I know what the heck is APA format? Well, here's what I do. First off, I use Google Scholar. And if you don't know what Google Scholar is, I'm throwing this up on my share screen. I hope you can all see Google Scholar right now. If you don't, somebody tell me. Let me get back to here. Okay, great. All right. So on Google Scholar, basically this is Google on steroids, right? So with Google Scholar, what you're going to do on Google Scholar, you just put in a topic, and let's say youth behavior. I put that in, I hit enter, and I get journaled articles, peer review articles, not Time Magazine, not People Magazine, but really good articles related to youth behavior. Now, this is important. If you're not watching the screen, you need to be watching the screen, okay? Because I'm about to show you what APA format is. If you look under the article, let's see, I'm looking at youth behavior, school structure, and student risk victimization. See this quotation mark? I'm hoping it shows my cursor moving around. If I click that quotation mark, a citation box just popped up. Can you see that? And there is the APA format. I can just copy it and paste it over into my reference document now. I'm hoping that's a mind-blown moment for some of you. I love Google Scholar. So that is a quick way. Another way to do that is to go to Purdue OWL. Where is my keyboard? Now, what the heck is a Purdue OWL? Well, Purdue OWL is a site at Purdue University that they send all of their graduate students to and their regular students to, and you can ask it questions. How do I do citations? Here is the 7th edition. You can click in there. So if you're ever stuck for how to do a citation, go to Purdue OWL. Just type in Purdue, you'll find it. Okay? So that is one of the things that will help you with your APA. All right, so Google Scholar and Purdue OWL. And I can't tell you how often I use both of those things. We've had a couple of other questions come in. December 10th, thanks for question. We have 2 schools that had a grant in cycle 6. None of us here at their school were here at the time, and so we don't have the application to see who our co-applicant was. Is there a way to find that out? I'm going to kick that back to either the grants branch or to Bridget for that.
Okay, this is Bridget. I'll respond. So we would need to, since cycle 6 grants have already been archived, we would need to put in a request. We can either do that this afternoon or first thing in the morning and find out that information for you. And then the grants management branch can email you that information.
Great. And Jody has a question. We currently have a program serving 1 of 2 of our district elementary schools, but we'll be writing this application for a district merge with a new school code. Would this be new or would this be expansion?
Let's see.
If it gets a new school code.
Yeah. So just to basically answer the question, if a school is merging with another school and they receive a new school code, then the application could be written for a new grant.
That's the way I read it, because it's always about that school code. All right, so we had an expansion grant, but it expired 3 years ago. So are we a continuation or expansion continuation? If you're continuing your expansion, okay, now you would have had 2 sets of students. You would have had your regular students and you would have had the expanded students. So it would be an expansion continuation. Okay. All right. I think that's got my questions. Remember, guys, to type the word question at the beginning of your question. That way I can see your question as it comes in. All right. So priorities, page 10. Page 10 are the extra points. Okay, first off, there's an absolute priority. Absolute means you gotta. Okay, absolute, you're going to do it, or else you're not even going to be considered. You have to meet the absolute priority, and that relates back to your eligibility, serving high need students, particularly students of poverty. Now you have 4 other priorities. These are competitive priorities, and you get additional points if you meet these priorities. Now, KDE makes the decision on these. Your grant reviewers will not. This will be up to KDE. Let me give you an example. If you're a continuation grant, you may receive 10 points. It won't be 5 points. It'll be 10 points or 0 points. And take a look at that section to see what it says. A continuation grant must have, in third sentence, to receive 10 additional points, continuation applicants must show 50% improvement in both math and reading scores. That's kind of hard, right? That's kind of hard. So that's based on your center profile, and KDE will make that decision. All right, it's a math thing. All right, so on the additional targeted support and improvement schools, if your school's on the list, you get 5 points. If you're a CSI school and your school's on the list, you get 10 points. You don't have to tell KDE. They're going to go look for it. They're going to find it. If you are a new school and you marked new applicant on the cover page and you truly are a new applicant, then you get 10 points. Okay, so do you see how you can't win all the points because you can't be both an ATSI and a CSI, and you can't be both a continuation and a new? Okay, so you can get 10, 15, maybe 20 points, but not all of them. All right, we'll talk more about that when we get back to our evaluation criteria. So let's look now at page 11 and 12. This is part of our needs assessment. Okay, now some of us, that'd be me. I really love me a needs section. Absolutely love it. I love the data and the tables and the charts. Just make sure you're covering what Katie is asking. This section has changed from previous years. Okay, and I want to show you how. Take a look at page 11. I'm even taking my page 11 out, and I'm flipping back over to page 41. Page 41 is the criteria. Page 41 looks exactly like these bullets here on page 11. You see that? Just a basic crosswalk. Reworded a little bit, but mostly the same. Please note that you're responsible for the data on poverty, percentage of growth of English learners, needs of working families, literacy. Okay, so you must do at least 5 of those specific things, looking on page 41. Okay. Let's look at the same thing on page 12. You'll see about private and homeschool participation. Okay, so private and homeschool participation, you are required to make sure your private schools and your homeschools know about 21st century. I don't know what that means for you. I don't know if that means that you send out letters and let them know. But let's look at what you're asked to write to on page 41. Is it 41? Yes. The second to the last bullet on page 41 talks about private and homeschool consultation. That form is attached. And also the bullet above that says, describe the consultation process with private and homeschool officials. So let me give you a couple of examples. Again, every school at the beginning of the year sends out a letter related to the federal funding they've received and offering private schools an opportunity to participate. Well, it is November, and this is a new program. What is your process for making sure they are reached? Okay. What are you going to do? Have you already done it? Because now, look at page 74. On page 74, you have a form that has to be completed that lists your schools, your private schools and your home schools, how you address that. Okay? And it requires a signature, I think. Yep. School official signature. Does that mean that I need to get Miss Smith, Miss Brown, Mr. Peterson's, all their home schools? Oh, not necessarily. A lot of our communities have homeschool co-ops. It could be that you communicate with them. It could be that you have a list of emails that you sent out and you have no's to all of those. This is a tricky one. It's hard to do. Not hard to do. It's just tricky to get that right. And the size of your community make it more challenging. If you don't have any private schools, that's fine. You can state that. But almost all of our districts have some homeschools. So you'll need to figure out a way to address that. Thought I might have heard Bridget hopping in. Okay, a couple of questions. If we had a grant with 2 sites inside, nope. How can we write 2 separate grants? Okay, let me read that again. If we had a grant with 2 sites in cycle 6.
We responded to that already.
Perfect. Next question. Currently, we have a 21st Century serving the middle high school in one school district. We are writing this grant to serve an elementary school in the other school district. Would it be a new grant? Asking for clarification because the school serves as the co-applicant and the Boys and Girls Club as the applicant. So is it a new grant?
Yeah, they would need to look at the cycle list that posted with the RFA and the call for reviewers.
Okay, so as I hear what Bridget's saying, if the Boys and Girls Club is the applicant and they've been an applicant before, then it is not a new application. Okay. Question, we recently received center profiles, but the application says to use the 18-19 center profiles. Is this still correct? I'm not sure, which is why I'm pausing.
Okay, so yes, in the RFA, we did state to use the 18-19 center profiles. At the time, we did not think that the 19-20 profiles would be out yet. I do know that a lot of schools shut down in March, and that is going to impact their numbers for their 19-20 center profile. So let me check on that, Colleen, and then we can post it with our FAQ.
Yeah, there's reason to do it either way, right? So we just want to be consistent for our reviewers.
Right.
All right. So for Michael, in the needs section, can we additionally address community data at the zip code level beyond the district county? Yes, absolutely. Well, and is it available? Yes, it is available from the U.S. Census. You can go in by zip code. You can also do it by census block. So yes, there are lots of ways you can do that. You may need to work with the census to get a tutorial. They have lots of tutorials on how to do that kind of stuff. But yes, you can find that information. Shelley asks, if our district has other 21st century elementary sites and the high school in the same district has never had one, is this a new school, a new applicant? If the high school has a different school number, their A1 number for the school, an ID, then yes, it's a new school. It's a new grant.
And
okay?
and just double check the cycle list.
Yeah. Yes, check the cycle list. You'd be surprised what we don't know about our own self. All right, let's see. So, and students with special needs. Go ahead.
Sorry, just to clarify, because I think Shelley asked that question because it seemed like maybe in the chat something had not said that it said if you were a district who was applying and you had sites before, even if it hadn't been in that school building, that should be continuation. And like you're saying, just want to make triple clear, if there's a school code that has never had a grant, even if there's been other schools in your district that have had a grant, as long as that school has not, that is new.
Yes, if that school has never been served by a state grant, And as we said, please check the cycle list because, you know, a lot of these questions, we don't know which schools and districts y'all are talking about necessarily. But yes, if a school has never been served by a state grant.
Yep. Okay, let's see. Okay, so on page 12, it also talks about students with special needs. Students with disabilities or other special needs must be served in the same ways that you would serve them in the school day during the after school. So if they need accommodations of some type, if they are on IEPs, etc., then those should be carried over into the after school. And there's also on page 41, it asks you in the criteria about that. The last bullet on page 41 is a specific question. How are you going to do that? Describe that. All right, then I want to just point out that all of this, your needs section, needs to connect to page 57, which is that logic model, right?
Hey, Jonna, let me jump in real quick. I've made a determination about the center profiles. We're going to stick with the 18-19 center profile that is requested in the RFA.
Okay. Awesome. Everybody get that? So we're going to use the 2018-19 profile, which really helps you with, you know, if you got hit by COVID, which you did, then that will really help you. All right, so the logic model, and just turn it over to page 57. Again, I'm spending a lot of time on this afternoon, but you'll see there the third box at the top of page 57. You will see that it says describe the participants to be served, right? So what the heck does that mean? Well, when you describe the participants to be served, I'm going to flop that over here and see if you can see it. All right, so this would be the box here that I just highlighted, and let's see if I can do this. I'm coloring it in red. Describing the participants to be served. This box correlates back to your needs section. Again, the 21st Century Program is not intended to address the needs of everybody in your school, but to a tight group of students who are the most in need. Who are those kids? And that's who you're going to be describing. You know, I always try to think about, okay, in a community, you have such a mix of kids. Some are the go-getters. They're, you know, we have my grandkids attended a school right next to Western Kentucky University where all the professors' kids went. The levels of need there were not quite as high academically, but they still had needs. There were pockets of needs. And so the services would be, in that case, targeting those pockets of needs, not the kids that might not need those services. Okay. All right, so back to our needs assessment slide overall. So you want to connect that third box to your project in your logic model, the needs section, and that becomes really, that whole needs assessment becomes part of the foundation for your proposal. And do you remember about an hour ago? We talked about that. The problem, and that's your need, is supposed to guide you along the way. So that problem section, that needs section, is really helping you decide what your solutions are. For example, a grant for K1 through 3 should look different than a middle school grant. A K1 through 3 grant that, oh, I don't know, has a high number of students who speak a second language at home, probably needs to address that as part of their need. So you need to really think about what the problems are and how you're going to address those. Okay. All right, page 13 and going forward. All right, we're into the project design section. So what is this? This is part of the solution. Okay, you've had your need, now you've got your solution. So you're going to have some project goals or performance goals, as it's called in the logic model, and it's called at the top of page 13. So you're going to have 6 of them. Why 6? And you could have more, but at least 6. Why? Because KDE said so. Okay, now, some things with grants are the way they are because the federal funder tells you that's how it's going to be. This is one of those. Okay. Every year, the 21st Century Program in Kentucky must respond back to the 21st Century Program federally related to these goals. So they pass that to you. What are your 6 goals and how do they relate? You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bullets there. No, because one's not really there. It's a off bullet. That 4th bullet is just a typo. Okay. So these goals apply to your regular attendees. Okay, now what do I mean by that? Well, they're attendees who have attended your program more than 30 days a year in the year. So let's say that Michael only comes once a week and he attends for 30 weeks. Michael is a regularly attending student. But what if Susie only comes once a month? That's only nine times. She's not regularly attending. You are not expected to improve the progress of students who are not getting the dosage from your program. Okay, if they're not there, then and that's also why you're going to be you're really going to be held to keeping that percentage of students high. So again, you have your 6 goals here, and at the bottom it points out your indicators or your objectives, as old folks like me call them. And you have the SMART objectives. We'll talk about those this afternoon, but there you have them: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound. Okay. Now, if you look at page 42, take a look at page 42. So on page 42, let me see. Oh, it would help if I got to page 42. So on page 42, you'll see that you have the 6 goals there, and you have the 6 bullets at the bottom for your performance indicators. Also, please look, if you see that under the SMART performance indicators, the first bullet provides and addresses 3 SMART performance indicators for goal 1, 3 for goal 2, 3 for goal 3, etc. Okay, so you need to be thinking about that. Now, in actuality, you're probably going to have more academic objectives or indicators than you might something else. That's okay. But you must have at least 3 for each. And this is a difference from last year. Okay, so be sure you catch that. Now on page 57, I am not sure. Oh, yeah. On page 57, you're going to put that same information in the logic model. Those performance goals, the performance indicators, those go in 2 different places. And then later we'll talk about the performance outcomes. Okay. So all this kind of goes together. All right. I can feel people becoming overwhelmed, even though I can't see you yet. Trust me, this is a journey. We'll get through there. All right. So page 14, still in the project design. And in that project design, you are required to include a literacy intervention for your K through 3 students. And this includes students who are in K1, 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 2, 2, 3, K through 3, any combination of K1, 2, and 3. Okay. If you have a grant that is for grades 3, 4, 5, and 6, you have a reading intervention in grade 3. And this is a daily intervention to help students improve. It could and maybe even should be the same intervention from the school day, just extended into the after school. Now, with that said, no, you may not train another teacher in read to achieve, in read 180. Is that the one? No, that's not what I'm thinking about. You know, the expensive one that costs $10,000 to train somebody. That's the one I'm thinking about. You may not retrain it or train a new teacher to extend that into the after school. You would use existing staff or some modeled fashion of that in the after school. Okay. All right. And these are all intentional. So on page 14, you've got reading intervention. You also have transition readiness. And this is for your middle and high school students. This is an intentional transition readiness. Okay? It's not just, oh yeah, sometimes we'll go on a field trip to the police station. No. What are you going to do to help students connect their school day into the after school and transitioning on into college career readiness? Okay. So what is your intent there? Must be intentional. If you take a look again over on page 42, back in our criteria, what you're going to be writing to. Actually, we're going to go to page 43. Nope. Hang on. How do I have that there? Hang with me. Oh, yes, it is page 42. Whew, I've been looking at this too long. So bullet 5 addresses transition readiness and the literacy activities. Okay. So bullet 5 on page 42, where in my notebook I have a big orange mark that apparently I couldn't see. So you're going to have to prepare for that in your proposal. All right, project design. Continued on page 15. Go back, Jonah, you roll too fast. Page 15 again. Evidence-based activities. Okay, so you're required to have evidence-based activities. Now, what does that mean? Okay, so your literacy intervention should have some evidence behind it. Your the theory that you're using for transition readiness should have some evidence behind it. Basketball does not have to have evidence behind it. All right, there are some things we do because we're building up kids' camaraderie, their leadership skills, etc. There is research that says 21st century activities that are done well and that have a continuum of students who are regular attendees, that they do improve. That is not what we're looking for. We're looking for you to have some relevant evidence related to your selected activities that shows that they are good. For example, you might say, well, we're going to buy a bunch of computers because we all know that computers are good and kids love computers, so they'll be happy to be there. No, there is no evidence for that I've been able to find. So, okay. So you have to kind of thread the needle there. What are you going to do that is evidence-based with your students? Every single thing doesn't need to be evidence-based, but you need to have some evidence described there. Also on page 15, the academic requirements are there. And this is something that gets a little confusing for folks. This is what we call the 50-50. So under your academic requirements on page 15, it talks about, in the addition to homework help, okay, the addition to homework help, 50% of the project must be related to academic remediation or acceleration, and 50% must be providing enrichment. Okay, so just say they get out of school at 3 o'clock, we have a snack for 15 minutes, we're going to do 30 to 45 minutes of homework time, and we're going to be open all the way to 6 o'clock. What part of that you divide by 50-50, okay, so that you can split that. And that applies to the summer as well. Okay, so be thinking about that. It can't all be basketball all the time. It also cannot be all homework assistance, and it cannot be just academic achievement. It must address more than that. Okay. Now, looking at page 43, flipping over again, you'll see the criteria break that out as well. Okay. So you have the 6 bullets there, just like you have the 6 bullets on page 15. That's a major change for this year. For those who have written this before, the language matches going back and forth. And we will cover some of these criteria too. So don't be worried about that. We will come back to that. It's a rather mind-numbing portion of our program today, but we will do it. So part 2, project design, pages 16 and 17. All right, we're looking at the student attendance, and this is where we get into the measurement of student attendance. This is the crux of your program as you begin to operate, is will you have students who attend regularly? That is 30 days or more enrollment of your students. So that in the second bullet, you have a minimum there of at least 25% of your total enrollment or 50 students, whichever is smaller. I believe that's the way it goes. So that's how you're going to be, that's what you'll be responsible for as you continue through the grant. In addition, this year, retention and recruitment, in my mind, are bumped up a little. The priority is a little more specific there. So take a look at page 43. Instead of just saying, we will recruit our students. No, that's not what you need to say. So looking in the middle of the page, recruitment and retention, you must describe a minimum of 3 recruitment strategies. So how are you going to recruit? And describe a minimum of 3 retention strategies. How are you going to keep them there? And you know, it's easier to recruit and retain students who are in elementary just because they can't drive. That's one thing. Second, because parents don't want them home alone while they're still at work. But what are you going to do with middle school and high school students? And when we come to this section in a bit, we'll talk a little more about those strategies that you might want to think about with those older students. There are some things, right? And those strategies need to be intentional. All right. Over to page 17. Now this is a specific set of points here about the regular school day. Again, there's criteria on page 43 that match up to that. So what are you doing formally, intentionally, to make sure students, that your students in the school day, when they come to the after school, they're still continuing to get a high level of care, right? A high level of learning on remediation and acceleration, a high level of those additional practices that you want them to be doing. And here's what I will tell you. I'm gonna quote the great, oh, I lost his name. Okay, guys, in the chat, who is the author who writes all the scary books? Stephen King. That's it. I remembered. Stephen King. So Stephen King says, show, don't tell. So I'm stealing his line there. Show, don't tell. Instead of saying, we will take care of our students and we're going to make sure that we talk to the teachers during the school day. No. How often are you going to talk to them? What are you going to talk to them about? Do you have a list of students that will be working with your site coordinator? And then you'll be talking to teachers every day about. How are you going to do that in the school day? This also includes, as you look over on page 44, I think, or 5. I can't see my slide right now. 43. This also includes, under linkage to the current day, what is your system for prioritizing student enrollment? So a not so good response would be, we have a system for prioritizing student enrollment. We will refer the issue to our, I don't know, to our teachers and let them decide and recommend who's there. No, you'll need something specific. We'll have a suggestion for that later. How are you going to decide? So for example, let's say you're serving 75 kids, but maybe you have, I don't know, 300 kids in your school, but you want to serve 75. That's awesome. Which 75? Right. So you'll have to prioritize that, and you're going to have to explain it in your proposal. Also, how are you going to ensure that your key staff from your program are attending teacher meetings? And now, typically, that's going to be your site coordinator. Okay, whoever's in charge of that local site every afternoon. So begin thinking about this. Oh, you mean the site coordinator doesn't start work at 3 o'clock? No, the site coordinator is a full-time position who should be working during the school day with teachers, principals, food services staff, transportation staff, going out to get partnerships. There's a lot of work to be done from, I don't know, 11:30 to 6:30 at night. A lot of work to be done, full-time position. Okay? So begin thinking about that when you're thinking about staffing your project. More on that in a bit. So show, Don't tell. Don't just say you're going to do it. Describe it. Give it some life. So page 18, again, I'm still holding my hand over at 43 because we're going to flip back there in just a second, I'm sure. Adult skill building is required, and you must have at least 6 skill building activities. Now, this was new as of about 4 years ago. So an adult activity, not skill building, an adult activity might be that they attend the chili dinner. That is not skill building. Okay. However, if you wanted to piggyback on the chili dinner and you wanted to have a homework help, like with how to get into Infinite Campus, and you wanted to have a session 3 hours before the chili dinner and have them come in and work on Infinite Campus, that might be an adult skill building. You might could have that every month, and to help parents learn how to use Infinite Campus. Another adult skill building might be something as big as a partnership with your local hospital, because I happen to love this when y'all hear it every year, to address the needs of families for jobs. You think any of your families are unemployed right now? Since many of our communities have restaurants and things that are still not functioning very well, I suspect some of your families are not employed very well. At one point in the pandemic, of the 7 adults in my immediate family, only 2 of us were working, me and my oldest son, but he's federally paid. Go figure. So what are you doing to ensure those jobs? If that's a key need, then what are you doing? Well, a hospital partnership where maybe a hospital and a community college get together and they help over a period of a year provide classes to employ your family members as certified nurse assistants. I don't know. Having the GED program as part of the 21st century program. I mean, there are several things you could do that are skill building, resume building, working on wardrobes for interviews, working on job skills or interview skills to go look for that job. There are lots and lots of skill building. Take a look at page 69. One of the forms that you have to complete, page 69, gives you some suggestions. There are some boxes to check off on. Now, there are 2 sets at the bottom of the page. Number 5 are skill building. Number 6 are just events. So take just a second and look at page 69 to see the difference between skill building and events. Now, there can be other things. This is not all inclusive, but this will give you a little bit of an idea of that, all right? This isn't just come in and eat chili. This is, and it's not just math night. It is a skill building activity, okay? All right, let's check my time. Oh, wait a minute. I'm on Central Time. Let's take a break because I'm over because I didn't change my watch. So it is 10:43 or 9:43 on this side of the state. Let's be back in about 10 minutes and we will pick up right here. Okay, I'm going to pop up a break slide. I'm going to mute myself so you can't hear me. And I'm also going to check out the questions and answers. So if you've got any, plop them in. When we come back at 10:40, I got to do math, 10:53, I'm going to answer some questions. Okay, see you back here in 10 minutes. One moment. All right. We are coming back at the top of the hour. I am digging into the Halloween candy. It's that kind of Monday, right? Okay. So let's answer some questions. Let me get us back to our regular slides. Okay, first off, on the cover page, it says that we are going to be doing that. Well, it says at the top of the date that the due date is December 9th. It is December 10th. Typo, we just didn't catch it. Okay, so typo there on the cover page on page 52, I believe that is. Yes. We will address that with an amendment. Speaking of amendments, okay, please look at the go to the KDE or the grants page where we have the KDE links for 21st century. Those amendments will be posted tomorrow. We already have a couple. They're not major. I mean, they don't tell you to wear, pink pants every Tuesday. They're just typos and things that we're cleaning up as we go. So that's one of them. Another one relates to Karen had asked a question and Sylvia had asked a question on page 43 or 44 under activities. Get there.
43.
Yep, page 43 at the top of the page. It says that the academic activities are worth 21 points. That actually should be 18 points. So the page scoring will be off a little bit. Okay, so that will be fixed in the amendment as well. Let's see. I'll talk about that one this afternoon. Someone asked to clarify on the 50% question. Now, when we're talking about the 50%, we are talking about the amount of time. Okay, on page 15. Okay, and also there's a criterion for it. Page 15, the second bullet toward the bottom says, in addition to homework help, 50% of the program must be dedicated toward remediation and acceleration, and then 50% to the others. So if you have whatever's, okay, 3 o'clock the bell rings, and the kids go have their snack, and they do their homework help. Let's say that takes an hour. If you have a 3-hour program, the other 2 hours would be split 50-50. Okay, so 100% of the learning time for new content and behavior would be would be split 50-50. 50% on acceleration or remediation, 50% on enrichment. Okay, so that's where the 50% and 50% is. It's the 100% of the rest of the afternoon. Okay, and the reason for that is so that you don't spend 2 hours at snack time or at homework. It can't just be homework. It has to be split. All right, let's see. Karen asked a question related to how the goals and performance measures would be included in the narrative, whether it's just in the logic model or in the narrative, and it should be in both places. If you want full points, you're going to address what's in the performance the criteria over in the page 42, 43 for your performance indicators, as well as in your logic model. The logic model is to help your reader logically see what you're going to do. Okay, so they should be able to see how it's connected. Will you be repeating some of that information in your narrative? Yes. Yes, you will. Okay, why? Because KDE said so. The 21st century program said so. Okay, so make sure it's in both places. Again, the logic model is really a summary of what you're doing. So you may not spell everything out. It's a summary, it's a graph, it's a chart. So it's going to look a little different than the way you present it over in your narrative section. Okay, but you want it in both places if you to receive full credit for that. Let's see. Question on the homeschools. Every year we send certified letters to our homeschools saying, hey, do you want to participate? Do we need to do that for this? Yes. Now, in your narrative, you can describe that every year we do this. We have done it again for this program, and we will do it every year to ensure that all of our programming meets the federal requirements for private schools and homeschoolers. Okay. So yes, and again, I'm just me, but if I were doing this grant, I would do that. I would make some additional reach out to those folks. Okay. All right. And for those of you who are not Jefferson County, just say, thank goodness we're not Jefferson County. We don't have 4,000 schools we need to address. Okay. All right. So we're starting on still on page 19 in our design section. If I missed your question, please re-enter it. I didn't mean to skip it. If I did, if you haven't gotten an answer yet, put it back up there. Some of them have been answered.
Donna, let me answer a question someone asked really quick. Will the RFA amendments be in a different color? Yes. So when the RFA amendments are made, those will be listed on a separate sheet in the RFA in red.
Excellent. All right. Thank you for another bite of my candy bar. And it's a little one. Okay. All right. So page 19. And I appreciate KDE putting that in a second color because that's a new thing they've been doing in the last few years, and it's so helpful. Thank you. All right. So summer programming. Let's talk about that. And this is an area where we get into a little confusion in terms of who you are as a grantee and how you're. Okay. So let me quit mumbling and I'll tell you. If you're a new grantee and you've never had a 21st century program before, you do not have to have summer programming in 2021. Hey, Bridget, mute your phone or mute your thing.
I just did, sorry.
Okay, thank you. So if you are new, your first year of summer coverage is in 2022. If you are restarting a continuation, it's in 2022. So for example, let's say that the last time you had a 21st century program was in 2015. It would take a lot to get ready for summer. So you don't have to do that until 2022. In fact, you can't use your funds for 2021 for summer. You would go in the summer of 2021, July, you'd get your training, you'd start buying supplies, you get up and running, and you'd open your doors in late August or mid-September. Okay. But if you are a continuation grant that has had a program that is currently operating a 21st century, either expansion or current, then yes, you're just going to keep doing what you've been doing, and you will have summer programming in July of 2021. Now you may say, okay, but it's COVID. Whatever you've been doing is what you're going to keep on doing, and KDE will give you some guidance on that. So just imagine that you're having programming in July, okay? After school programming in July. Now it's also different in terms of elementary, middle school, and high school. Elementary schools, if you'll see it right there toward the top of the page, you have minimum days and hours of operation that are described there, right? You also have, for middle and high school, lesser numbers of days that are provided there. Okay, so those are pretty self-explanatory. And again, you are required to have minimum for the elementary, minimum amounts of time spent on elementary and on math and literacy. You also are required to have high quality staff during your summer, just as you would after school, which will come up in just a bit. So we'll talk about that. Now the summer is described on page 44 in your criteria. You'll be writing to that. You see, yep, at the top of 44. And then also on page 70, one of your attachments gets to your summer planning, your program schedule at the bottom. It has the summer. Now, I'll also point out as you look at page 70, page 70 also includes holidays or breaks. These are not required, but you could have programming during breaks or during holidays, and there are some 21st century programs that do that. If you have that programming, you would put it here in your schedule. Okay, you are required to have summer programming. Now, field trips is also addressed at the bottom of page 19, and the thing that you really need to think about is is that, or to remember is, always ask KDE to approve that field trip before you take it. You can't just decide to go to Washington, D.C. with your whole group of kids. No. And the field trips must occur during out of school time. So during your normal hours. So if you had a school year field trip, you might go to the area library, or you might go to a farm, or you might go to a place of employment and watch the robotics, right? You could do that in after school. But you wouldn't have a day-long activity during the regular school year because you'd be interrupting the school day. Okay? No 21st century funds can be spent during the school day, with the exception of the staff you're paying. Okay, that's the exception. But no student expenditures during the school day. All right, page 20. Now we're starting to talk about program operation. Now, program design that we just talked about and program operation are the two biggest parts of your grant. You'll see that in a bit. But your program operation is where we really start talking about your capacity to operate this. Can you do it? And how many days will you do it? And will it meet the minimum? So it's 4 days per week, 3 hours per day as a minimum. Okay, so 3 to 6, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. That'd be fun. Or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Whatever way you choose to do it. The time commitment excludes transportation. Okay, so once you put them on the bus, the clock stops. Even if you had, for example, some kind of super powerful learning activity happening on the bus to take them home, it does not count. That's not part of your after school time. Your program must begin 3 weeks after the school year begins, no later than. Okay, so whatever date you're starting, within 3 weeks, you would start your 21st century program. It may include morning activities. Okay, so looking at the bottom, really the middle of the page, there are a couple of program options there for mornings. And as you know, those of you who've been involved with this for a while, this has been a little bit challenging. But this goes back to the purpose of the program. 21st Century Grant Program is not a babysitting club. It is not a drop-off program. So it is not intended just to take care of the children whose parents drop them off at 6:30 in the morning. Do those students get to be counted as your regular attendees? If they attend 3 hours. Okay, so you're going to have to figure that part out and decide which of these models that you will be doing. Is there real learning occurring during your morning programming? Okay, so Model 1 and Model 2, or Option 1 and Option 2, are on page 20. Be sure that you read through that and determine how that will occur. You also must address the bullet there on page 20 that talks about a timeline for minimum operation, and also all these other things, breaks, etc. So take a look at page 44 first, and then we're going to look at page 70. So page 44, looky there. There's all those little activities again. And then on page 70, you've got that chart we just looked at for your program schedule. Your reader should not have to figure out when your program's open and when it's closed. It should be very clear. Okay, so you're gonna outline that in your narrative per page 44, and also as an attachment, page 7. All right, so let's talk a little bit about your staffing. Looking at page 21, who runs this thing? Well, you're going to see some bullets there at the top of page 21, right? All right, so with all these bullets, we're just going to kind of work through these, and I hate reading stuff to you, but here we go. A minimum of 2 certified teachers that work 8 hours each, or it could be some combination. So for example, it could be that you have one teacher who works 16 hours during the week. Now, if they're a current teacher, I want you to think about that. They are not going to have fun for long. They are not going to have fun for long, because that means they're working the whole school day and then they're working 4 hours, 4 days a week. Or spread out over 5. So you have to think about that. How are you going to split that up? You could have 4 teachers who work 4 hours a week. So that's just the minimums there. How are you going to make that happen? And remember, you have to address reading intervention in the littles, probably done by a teacher, maybe not. But that's for you to describe here in your staffing plan. In addition, you could have some part-time folks, and that's kind of described here at the bottom of the page. College student, AmeriCorps, retired teachers, community folks. High school students could also be there, because a high school student could do tutoring. Now, let me stop me for a second here. A high school person who's on your staff or as a volunteer would not be accountable within the ratio of students, okay? But they could still be there as part of your paid or unpaid staff. All right, so looking ahead and seeing what I got coming in the next slide. So your staffing requirements, looking on page 21 again. Yep, this is a teachable moment, and you're going to look for it. So on page 45 and 46, there are 8 bullets there. But on page 21, there's only 7 bullets. I'm going to give you a minute or two to find which bullet's missing or is extra, whichever way you want to look at it. Okay, so you get the assignment in the chat. I want you to respond. There's 7 bullets on page 21 that correspond to the 8 bullets on pages 45 and 46. Which bullet is extra on which page? Okay. All right, I'll give you a couple of minutes for that. I'll pull the chat up and wait for your answer. Okay, for those of you who haven't screened at me, it should be 44 and 45, not 45 and 46. And there you go. It's the ratios, right? So the ratios were not, that last bullet was left out. So on page 21, I suggest you write a little something about the ratio being required there. Okay, so you don't miss that when you come back over to the back section. Now, the ratios are mentioned on page 22, but it's a little, a little different on those pages 44 and 45. Just making sure you're paying attention there. All right. Let's see. Looking for there was a question, how the platform maintains, yep, there it is. Let's see. Question, our grant expired last year, but funds were extended into this year. Are we a continuation, or do we have to provide summer programming? I think the answer to that is going to be no, but I'm going to let Stacy answer that one. Excuse me, Bridget. Bridget's going to answer that one.
Okay, so your grant expired last year. So you're a cycle 12 that is extending funds that you currently have. Can we wait until summer for 2020 programming? So if you are rewriting for continuation during this time and you run out of funds, you say by the end of the school year, that's a good question. Can we wait until summer 2020, which it would actually be 2021, I think is what you meant to say, as a continuation. Let me check with my federal person on that, and we'll respond to this before everybody gets off today.
And so Kristen's question did not get answered earlier. If I had one grant with 2 sites previously, could we write 2 separate continuation grants, but do them separately, or would we still write the one?
You would still write one application to serve both sites because they are in your original application.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. All right, so a little more on staffing. The site coordinator is a requirement. There are, and I want to say extremely rare situations where you don't have a single full-time adult at that site, okay? So you're going to have a full-time person who's working at your site, but what if it's only for 4 days a week? Well, yeah, they still have other things to do, lots of things to do, all the prep for the next week. So let's say you have your Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and you're off on Friday. On Friday, your site coordinator is going to be working to get ready for the next week. Okay, getting all the stuff put away, getting things started out again, looking at curriculum, having meetings with those teachers. Okay, so going to the teacher professional learning that they attend, there's plenty of work for them to do. Okay, lots of work. So yes, they are going to be a full-time person. They can be classified. They could even be a retired educator. So there are ways to keep that both high quality and not quite so expensive. Most, excuse me, most 21st century learning programs really look at that, because do you want to spend $75,000 plus fringe for a teacher, and then you don't have really enough for other positions and materials? So you just kind of have to think about that. Okay. Volunteers, except for high schoolers, must have a GED. Okay, so they must have at least a GED, if not a high school diploma or higher. And then on pages 22 and 23, we do get into that child ratio, and it's a 1 to 15, but there are some instances where it could be a 2 to 25 for the older students. But keep in mind, it should never, especially for your youngers, dip down lower than that. This is something that you are both accountable for and you're watched for. Okay, this is a legal thing you really have to be careful about. All right, now let's talk about something that's even more confusing than the student staff ratio, the required professional development. To ensure that all 21st century staff have the required training, all 21st century staff will attend the 21st century training. Okay? So even if you've been to it before, you should anticipate going again. Okay, so you need to budget for it. You need to consider it. Now, most of the 21st century training, and they're bulleted here on page 22, most of this is going to be in a regional location. So you're just going to drive to it and back. And it will not be that costly, but you need to budget for it, if for no other reason than to show your reader that you thought about it. But you also need to be careful, because as you turn over to the top of page 23, all of your PD is limited to $2,000 per grant year. Okay. Earlier, I mentioned reading recovery, and thank you for reminding me of the name of the program. You cannot spend $10,000 to train up a teacher in reading recovery, because frankly, there's some monetary limits for that. Okay. Now, but what if you do need other training? Absolutely, but it needs to be cost effective, and you will also get approval from KDE for that. And I'm going to give you a facetious example. Let's say that again, you do have that 50% or more of your population are English language learners. okay? Or they speak a second language, a language other than English at home. Those students, let's say that you don't know how to speak Spanish, and that's the majority of your students are speaking Spanish. I'm making this up. Perhaps you have an online course that you take for Spanish that's very inexpensive, okay? Don't know. So there could be some specific things that would apply to your grant proposal and to your targeted students that might not apply to anybody else. That could be perfectly okay. But again, you would get permission ahead of time. Now, also page 45, I want to show you this because I think some of our folks might miss this if we don't point it out. On page 45 in the middle, on the criteria, the second bullet on page 45 says, the chart identifies and describes a minimum of 3 additional professional development opportunities that will be provided to support identified needs. Okay. It doesn't say, do you want to have activities, professional development activities? No. This is describe 3 additional professional development opportunities, and it says put it in a chart. Okay, so you need to be really careful about that you do what it says for you to do right here. You have a professional development chart that identifies which staff are getting what, and it's outlined there. And you have 3. Now, let me give you an example of something that wouldn't cost a lot of money. Let's say that you are brand new to the 21st century space, brand new, and you have a brand new staff person who's going there. I could see a really high quality professional development being a year-long mentoring program where you go to visit another site and you have ongoing conversation with the 21st century person that's over there. You have a new find a friend thing. Okay, very inexpensive. You're talking mileage to talk to that other person. I think that would be awesome. You will learn more by going to visit another site than almost any other way. So there could be multiple ways of doing that, but getting a mentor would be a good one. And it's not expensive. All right, so page 24, transportation. Oh, I didn't mention this. Let me go back. Health and safety. There's a whole list of these things at the bottom of page 23. They're also addressed on page 25. Please make sure that you have that, because you've got to. Part 3, page 24, transportation. Now, transportation must be addressed, but not necessarily provided. What the heck does that mean? Well, the questions relate to, on page 46, how will you address transportation? You could, and it says, how will they safely get to and from? If parent pickup is the way to go, then parent pickup is the way to go. If you have for example, we have some 21st century programs that are in small towns, and the students can walk safely or bike safely to their homes. If that's the case for you, you describe that. If you have a parent pickup line, you describe that. If you have a combination, you describe that. Many of our 21st century programs also have a drop-off. So, for example, you may have a bus that goes and drops off kids at Lovely County Baptist Church on the west side of town. And if so, then parents meet there in a well-lit location to pick up their children. So you describe that. It doesn't mean that you have to pay for transportation out of your 21st century funds, because transportation is expensive. Now, what do you do if you do have to pay for transportation? Well, that's okay. Because if you can't get the kids home, then you won't have a program, right? So you really kind of, it's the gift of the magi, right? If you don't have long hair, you don't need the combs that he pays for, if you don't have the watch thingy, so chicken egg. You got to have the kids being able to get home, or else you will not have a program. There are 21st century programs who spend a lot of the fund on the transportation piece. Once you're funded, KDE may be able to give you additional ideas about how to partner with folks on that. But if you got to have it, you got to have it. How will your kids get home from the program? All right, so under that is a little schedule about snacks. Your snacks and meals should come through the USDA food program, not your 21st Century Grant funds. Now, if you are a nonprofit, you can get those through the USDA as well. It takes some paperwork, but that can happen. The 21st Century program does not pay for food. With some exceptions, you must get permission, and that relates to programs. For example, if you have a cooking club, okay, that might be a place to use funds, but it is not pizza. It is never pizza. Okay. All right. So check out that schedule on your snacks and meals, and I'll tell you that a lot of our programs do the meals at night before the kids go home, and that's a great service. There's some time limitations on it. So the facility at the bottom of page 24 must be the school site, but that doesn't mean everybody knows what your school site looks like. So you do still need to describe what your high quality site is per the criteria on page 46. Again, this is one of those show, don't tell kind of things. Okay, you want to say that your facility is a handicap accessible 1-floor facility with emergency alarms that lock at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, etc. Whatever your facility is. All right. Peek back over there. So we're going to start a new section. We're going to start on community collaboration and partnership. This is where we can get into a little more into those collaborative agreements with your co-applicant and with your community partners. So we will be getting into that momentarily. Let's see. Okay, good. I think we're caught up at the moment. Okay, so Carolyn has asked, the adult-child ratio, 16 to 18-year-old students may not work with middle school or high school, and she's done a question mark.
Just real quick, Jonna, I had responded to Carolyn that they may not work in a supervisory role to meet the staff and student ratio or work alone. Yes. It is addressed on page 22 of the RFA.
That's exactly right. So a student, a 16 to 18-year-old that is a student does not qualify as an adult yet. So that doesn't work with your ratio. Nice. Okay, so page 25 plus, let's talk about this collaborative partnership thing. And I haven't given you a comic strip in a while. Now, most of you know I normally have videos. They don't work well in this environment. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. So we're comic booking it today. I love this one. Oh, yeah. So you both have the idea and you both kill yourselves getting the idea. That's not a partnership. That's not fun at all. Here's another one. You're nothing without me. It's not very nice. And maybe my favorite, although there is one more. Before I begin, I'd like to make it known that I did not volunteer to do this presentation. Together, everyone annoys me. Yeah. Now, a partnership, a collaboration is where some synergy is involved, right? Now, it doesn't mean that you look alike necessarily, but you do have that synergy. Your community partners, your co-applicant are providing services to help the targeted students. It's not something random. It's something thoughtful as to why you might need them. So let's look at page 25. We're also going to be looking at page 46, 47, and then 71 and 72 in a minute, okay? So first, let's look at page 25. Again, we're talking about the required co-applicant. Hang on a minute. I'm going to try to get ahead of it. Okay, good. I'm going to say that in a minute. So the required co-applicant, you're going to have one co-applicant, and you're going to have multiple community partners and community partner agreements. Okay, so flip over for me to page 46. And we all have paper cuts by the time the day's over, unless you're electronic, in which case your eyes just hurt. Okay. All right. So page 46 at the bottom, it starts talking about your partnerships. There is a co-applicant agreement that's signed. It's identified on the cover page. And if the fiscal agent is a school district, an LEA, the proposal includes just one district partner. This is confusing. Okay. The district co-applicant cannot be a district department or agency. So Lovely County Elementary can have one partner of all the district people, like the Frisk or the PTO. But it would not have those groups as their co-applicant. Their co-applicant must be separate from the school district. Conversely, if you are a nonprofit or a faith-based group that's applying, your co-applicant will be the district. Okay. Our partners are typically community-based partners, which would include the 4-H, Boys and Girls Club, YMCA, the local library, the Chamber of Commerce, the hospital, the Corvette Museum, the Corvette plant. It could be so numerous, but it also should be logical. It should be logical based on what you said your students needed. For example, if you had a project, if your program is going to be heavily into STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, then I would expect to see partners related to science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Okay, so try to think thematically about those partners. Okay. So let's look back at page 71 and 72 before I say a little bit more about your co-applicant and your partners. So page 71, and actually it's 72 and 73. 71 is the co-applicant. You will have one of these. So at the top, you can mark one. Okay. The next page is if you're, this is for a district partner agreement. So if you're a school district and you want your Frisky and your PTO and all the other things to be your partner, you might have this page. Okay, this is the page you would have as a partner agreement. Then you would have your community partner agreements. That's page 73. Right? And you would have 4+ of those. Clear as mud. Check that page. Gotcha. Display your CBO data. So yes. All right. So now I want you to think about who those partners might be. And by the way, these are minimums in terms of the community partnerships. The co-applicant is, and this is the way I think about it, it's like a spouse, not a sibling. Okay, so the Frisk would be a sibling, their cousin. It could be a district or a CBO. You only have one of those. And they're supposed to be key to your sustainability and your operation. You should see them throughout your program. Who is your co-applicant? Okay, they're your big deal. But it's not necessarily someone that you give money to. Now you certainly could, but it's not necessarily. For example, the 21st Century funds are supposed to go to operate the program. If you needed to purchase something, that's fine. But if a big chunk of your grant is going to a partner or a co-applicant, I'm not sure that's really what was intended. Just be aware of that as you go into it. Now, your community partners are like friends, and you could have lots of friends. You could have 5 or 6 or 10 or 15. But now I would say make it realistic. Okay, make it realistic. And you're going to have at least 5 partners If you're a school district, you're going to have what I call 1+4, your district partners and 4 other partners. But if you're a CBO, a nonprofit, you just have 5 partners. You could also have 6 or 7 or 8, but don't have 20. Okay, don't have 20. Nobody's going to be impressed by that. It's a lot of work, and it really just makes it look like you're going out there to get a whole bunch of partners. I would rather, if I'm reading your proposal, see 6 or 7 partner forms that are really aligned to what you're going to do. For example, if you have cited literacy as a key problem and you have partnered with, I don't know, with the senior women's club of your county, and they're going to come in twice a week and read books to kids, I think that would be very aligned and would be a great partnership. Just saying. So again, see page 22 for that. Excuse me, 72 for that. And in fact, I want you to go and take a minute or two and look at the top of page 25 and the top of page 26 to think through that. Just take a minute or two to think through those different types of partnerships and begin making a list of who your partners might be. Your district partners, if you have them, and your community partners. Just a couple of minutes on that. All right. We'll talk about that again as we talk about the order of your proposal in a little bit. Real quickly. Okay, so Suzanne has asked another question related to an old grant cycle. So I'm assuming that Bridget and the KDE branch will be working on that to figure out how to make that.
And also, so any questions that we would normally maybe be able to provide more of a response to in person, any request on here that does not receive a response, please submit your question to the KDE RFP at education.ky.gov, and that will go through the grants management branch if you're trying to find your co-applicant, who that was, or what cycle you are, or any kind of information like that.
Great. I'm also gonna, let's see, Ashley has a question about dinner. Could dinner be provided at snack time and the snack at dinner time rather than the way it is on the schedule?
Yes, that is up to the program. Great. As long as you stay within the hours in the guidance.
Because it does take a little longer. You have to, you're there a little bit longer for that. All right. So let's look at, again, if you have any other questions about that, let us know. We're going to switch to the evaluation section. Now, some of you who have worked on big, large federal grants, shoot, no big evaluation here. Small, tiny evaluation. In fact, we won't even call it that. We'll call it data collection. So you are actually not allowed to spend more than 1% of your funds on an evaluation. KDE will manage the overall evaluation process. You will be entering data into the KDE's contracted data site. And somebody, I'm not telling you to do this, but you might pay a stipend of this much, itty bitty bitty bitty, for whoever's doing that. Probably, though, it's going to be your site coordinator who's already being paid to do that. And so that'll work. If you look at the criteria on page 47, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You have 7 questions there. So it's not nothing. Okay, you'll need to address these questions. It's not nothing. Describes a plan. How are you going to use it? But all of this is related to what I would call a cycle of improvement for your grant. Because here's an example. And this is a real example. You bring your staff together on a Tuesday in November, and you realize, look at our numbers for our attendance. Our attendance numbers are really bad on Wednesdays. I wonder why our attendance is so bad on Wednesdays. What are we doing on Wednesdays that's so bad? And Susie speaks up and says, oh, that's our square dancing day. Oh. That's what you're supposed to be getting out of your data, is this formative data that helps you make your project better. Once you get rid of that square dancing and you put in something else like robotics or almost anything, archery, then your attendance will go back up. This is, and if you're sitting there saying, but we can't just change yes, you can. You call KDE, you talk to your monitor, and they'll give you some guidance on how to improve your attendance on that day. It may be that Wednesdays are bad because all your kids go to church and their parents just can't deal with it. They can't deal with after school and church on Wednesday. Well, then maybe you need to think about not having an after school day on Wednesday and have it Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. I don't know. I'm not saying do that, but I do know this. There's always a different way. Always. We used to get our mail by ponies. Okay. There's always another way. So, yeah, very interesting to think through all the possibilities of this. So think about this section on page 47 as a way to keep it improving. How will you know that Stevie in the 2nd grade is actually improving because of what you're doing? Well, because he's getting an extra dose of intervention and literacy every afternoon. And you're going to talk to his teacher, and you're going to know that. You're going to be collecting data on Stevie. All right. So looking at page 27, still, the bottom of that page talks about the budget. And we're going to go through the budget this afternoon, a couple of examples of that. But I do want you to know that your budget is addressed in more than one place. Okay. And it should reflect your program. When I am doing a grant review, I go to the budget first and I read through it to see what you're going to buy, because that should paint a picture for me of what you're going to do. For example, if there's not a teacher salary in there, I'm going to wonder how you're going to meet the teacher salary requirement, or the teacher requirement of 16 hours a week. Oh, they didn't include it. Well, maybe it's going to be in kind. Well, okay, maybe it is, but they didn't tell me that. So how do I know? Okay. Your reader will only know what you tell them. So you need to make sure your budget reflects the same thing that your narrative. Okay. Also make sure that your principal is aware of what you did. And your site coordinator, everybody who's involved with your existing project, if you have one, that they're involved in the rewrite, because you don't want to do something that nobody wants to do. And this is for all of you out there that do this work, you know this. You get 6 or 8 weeks to write a grant proposal that people will live with for 5 years. So you people who are out there that are going to have to live with it for 5 years, I want you to keep that in mind. Somebody's busting their butt to get this application written so that the program will exist for your kids for the next 5 years. Some things are not going to be correct, but we can fix those. And most importantly, this budget will be fixed. Why? Because just because you win an award does not mean that you're going to get exactly what you asked for in the budget. Okay, so the budget criteria are over on page 48, and I want you to go there. Okay, go to those budget criteria because they are very, very important. Every year, we get an application that doesn't address the criteria. Okay, so 2 parts of the budget, really 3, but anyway, you have the budget that we know. It's got numbers, it's got lines. We'll talk about that this afternoon. But you also have on page 48, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 bullets that must be addressed if you want to win the 18 points on this page. Okay? So demonstrates the administrative capacity to manage a grant. That will not be in your number budget. Completes the budget summary. Okay. With years 1 through 3 addressed. Completes the budget narrative for year 1, 2, and 3. Those will be addressed in the back. Explains how grant funds will be used to supplement, not supplant. Hold your finger on that. Maintains a separate account of funds for 21st century. Make a note right there to talk to your finance department. Finance department can help you with their what they do for that. Finance department can also help you with the last bullet. Describes a system or a plan for tracking staff time and effort. What do you mean track the time and effort? Well, you're paying people for this work. So when they come to work, they should fill out some timesheet. When they go home, they should fill out some timesheet. But we're teachers. We don't have to do. Sorry. It's federal money. You have to be accountable for that. You have to demonstrate that someone worked for those funds. So absolutely, you must do that. Must have that and explain that here. So now I said to hold a finger on that 4th bullet. Explains supplement and supplant. Okay, so I'm going to go back over here because I think it is described over here too. Go back to page 28. I have some new examples. I'm excited about this. So what is supplanting? Well, supplanting is paying for something you're already paying for, that you're already doing with other funds. Okay, so you're already paying, let's say you're already paying for 100% of your principal's time for him to do his work. Can you pay for that 100% out of your 21st century grant? No, you already have funds for that. For this project, it also includes paying for something you're doing in the school day. 21st century funds cannot be used for something in the school day. For example, let's say that you have an archery team that is part of your after-school program, and the archery competition is on a Wednesday at 9 a.m. in another county. Your 21st century grant cannot pay for the transportation for taking those students to that competition. They can go. Okay, I don't want you to mishear me. They can go. You just can't use 21st century funds for that. Okay, because it's happening in the school day. All right, so anytime we talk about that, if you want, for example, earlier I said you can't have pizza. I misspoke. You can't pay for pizza out of your grant. You can have pizza. Drive down to your local pizza place, pull out your checkbook and write a check out of your personal account for pizza. Or get a partnership and have them give you pizza. Okay, you can have pizza. You just can't pay for it out of these grant funds. Same thing for supplanting. And so I thought of a new example. Okay, football. Okay. All right. So some of our middle and high school programs have, they have formed 21st century programs to impart, help athletic groups and other groups from the school to keep up with homework and make up tests in the after school, right? So they can come in. Well, what you couldn't do is if your quarterback missed a test and he came to the after school to take the test, you wouldn't pay for his trainer to come in and sit with him while he took the test. The trainer's already being paid. Okay, that would be supplanting. You also can't pay for a high protein bar because he needs a high protein snack in the after school. No, I mean, you can out of your own pocket, but not out of 21st century funds. You also can't replace his helmet that he left at home and just buy him a new helmet, run down to Dick's Sporting Goods and get him a new helmet. Okay, that would be supplanting. Right, so anything that's already being paid for, you can't pay for that with 21st century funds. Right? So planting's a hard thing to understand sometimes. And so I'm really happy when I think of a new thing. Okay. So you can help him take his test, but you can't feed him an extra high protein meal. You can't buy him some kind of equipment. I would even go so far as saying that you can't tape up his, his cramp in his leg or something. Somebody with football background tell me something else. I don't know. That would be supplanting. All right. There's also some on the sustainability. There is some additional tougher language here. Okay. Making sure I'm okay. Yep. Additionally, let's go about 6-7 more minutes, and then we're going to have our lunch break, okay? So you have some additional tough language on pages 28 and 29 about sustainability. There has always been a portion of your grant that you have to respond to. But I think last year, maybe the year before, the 21st Century Program also included a preliminary sustainability plan that you will have to develop by your 3rd year of your program. Okay, now they'll work with you on that. When you go to some of the meetings with them, they're going to help you develop that some, but just be aware that this isn't, oh, I'm going to make up something about sustainability and how I'm going to keep my project going once the money's out. And no, it's going to be a little deeper than that. You're going to have to really come up with something as you become a grantee. And that will be a well-developed plan, it says on page 28. Again, no fees can be used for that. At the bottom of page 29, it talks about contractual agreements. There are a lot of rules with this. I'm leaving you to read that about contractual agreements. But understand, if you go into a contract with someone, it has to be approved by KDE first. Okay, you can't just say, hey, Miss Susie, I'm going to pay you $50,000 this year to do this piece of work. No, get it approved first. Okay. All right, and then our first little bit more, let's see, just to remind you on your budget, just because you are awarded something does not mean you're going to get what you asked for in your budget. Okay, did I hear you coming in there, Miss Bridget? Nope, okay. So if you look on pages 30 through 32, and this is a perfect place to stop. Can't believe I got to this point at this time. Great. As we go to lunch, here's what I'd like you to do. I would like you to look through pages 30 through 32. I also want you on the bottom of page 32 in big black letters. It says what I just said. Just because the application is awarded does not mean you get everything you asked for. I would say nobody gets everything they asked for. Something's going to probably get changed somehow. Okay, so don't, when you first find out you're awarded, don't get too excited. Don't start spending money. Wait till you have your sit down with KDE and they'll help you with that grant. Also, never ever spend your money on something that isn't working. As you go forward with your 21st Century Program, you should be in constant conversation with the folks at KDE, with the 21st Century Program, about ways to improve your program, even if it means giving up your square dancing day. Okay, if something's not working, you need to fix it. All right, so I'm going to let you go to lunch, but I'm giving you a homework assignment. I would like for you to review page 30 through 32. Look at the guidance, the allowable, the unallowable, and the required approval. And if you have any questions, put them in the chat, and we will answer them when we return at straight at 1 o'clock. Bridget, do you have anything else before we go to lunch?
I do not. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. Well, we'll be right back here at straight up 1 o'clock. I will see you then, and we will start at 1 o'clock, Lord willing. Lord willing. Thank y'all. I'll put a slide up. I'm going to turn my camera off, all that. So we'll see you in an hour, a little more.